Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast. This episode was recorded on location in Washington, D.C. from the D.C. Metro Police Aviation Hangar as part of the Hangar Z Vertical Valor Blades of Valor tour. The road tour included visits to some of North America's public safety aviation units, showcasing some of the country's heroes who exemplify courage, dedication, and selflessness in the line of duty every day. Jack Schonley, Brent Bundy from Vertical Valor magazine, and I were invited into the D.C. Metro Police Aviation Hangar to see firsthand the good work they're doing to protect the capital of the United States. In this episode of the Hangar Z podcast, we sit down with Sgt Danny Thaw and pilot Kevin Chittick from the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Air Support Unit. The conversation delves into the critical role of aviation during civil disturbance situations and providing valuable information to ground units. Listeners will gain insights into the complexities of operating within the tightly controlled airspace of Washington, D.C. We discuss and emphasize the importance of crew resource management and the strong relationship between law enforcement and air traffic controllers, highlighting the significance of fostering trust and communication. We discuss the impact of new technologies on law enforcement aviation, along with stories from impactful missions, including the response to the January 6th incident. Tune in to discover the essential value of aviation in enhancing situational awareness and supporting officers on the ground in their ongoing commitment to public safety. Thank you to our sponsors, Airbus, Dallas Avionics, and Metro Aviation.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
All right, welcome to the Hangar Z podcast. I'm your host today, Jack Schonley, and I'm with Jon Gray today, the creator of the Hangar Z podcast. Jon, good morning.
Hey, good morning. How's it going?
We're still on the Hangar Z Vertical Valor podcast tour. We've been to Alabama, Tennessee, and now we're in Washington, D.C. And we're really excited to be here in Washington, D.C. We're with Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Air Support Unit today. We've got a couple of people from there that are going to spend some time with us and tell us about themselves, tell us about the unit. And we're in their hangar with an open hangar door. We've had 3 UE landings from the Air Force in past 15 minutes. So
we think they were showing off just for us.
I think so too. I think they heard Vertical was here and they said, Brent Bundy's here? Oh my gosh, we need some pictures. I've never had a Brent Bundy picture taken of me.
Yep.
And so they did some approaches and Brent took care of them.
Yes.
We've got some good shots. But we're in the hangar, so there may be some noise because right behind me is, what river is this?
It's the Anacostia River and South Capitol Street Bridge.
Cool. And it's a helicopter route.
Yes.
So we've seen Coast Guard, Air Force, and DC Metropolitan Police may launch on a mission here while we're here. So with all that said, let's get started and welcome Sgt Danny Thaw.
That's correct.
And pilot Kevin Chittick.
That's right.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast.
Very good.
Before you go, I just want to say, sitting here in the nation's capital on the week of Police Week, this is
Yes.
an absolute honor.
Yeah, it
and
is.
never, when I started this podcast, did I ever envision a scenario where we'd be in DC Metro's hangar recording a podcast with you guys. This is an absolute honor. Looking out the front of the hangar, this is amazing. We talk about, and I just even brought it up with you guys, the podcast, really all this is hangar talk. And here we are literally in a hangar just talking. So
Yeah.
That's it. I just want to say thank you guys before we even get started, that this is absolutely amazing. Thanks for the hospitality to this point, and look forward to this conversation.
Yeah, and it is Police Week, like Jon said, a very busy week for the people that we have here. All the law enforcement agencies throughout Washington, D.C. during Police Week are very, very busy, stretched very thin. Over our shoulders is Hannah Glasgow from Office of Communications. Thank you, Hannah, for being here. And Tom Lynch from that office helped get this approved, and we thank him and Hannah for their work on this. So Hannah's just making sure that we stay in line here, especially Jon and I, because the word is out about this tour.
I saw Danny hand her a taser earlier. Just about one.
That's probably a good idea. So let's get into it. And we're just going to go through your backgrounds a little bit. And we'll start with you, Danny. Tell us, where did you grow up? How did you end up in police work? And then how did you end up in aviation unit?
It's a long roundabout way. I'm born and raised in Washington, D.C., K through 12, D.C. public school. I never wanted anything more but to leave this area from the time I could probably put a coherent thought together.
Wow.
So to end up back here has been a pretty interesting journey. But yeah, I'm glad to be back here. How did I end up back in Metropolitan Police Department? Honestly, at the time, I was really just looking for a job. I'd just gotten out of the Army, and I was walking with my, at that point, she was my girlfriend, now my wife, and saw a Metro bus ad, and it showed Metropolitan Police Department was hiring.
Those ads work.
They do
Well,
work.
I guess they do. And I made a kind of a joke, like, I guess, so I could try that, like, we'll see where that goes.
Yeah.
And then I ended up getting the job with the intention, obviously, of still never staying in D.C.
Wow.
So,
Wow. But here you are,
Yeah.
16 years?
16 years later.
That's, I don't think you're going anywhere, Danny.
No, probably not.
I think you're staying right here.
Yeah, and it's been a good ride. I've had a lot of opportunities here. Been to a lot of the different units and gotten a lot of different experience.
Such as, give us some of the units you worked.
I was patrol. I was in our hazmat and civil disturbance, lethal munitions teams. I did that for a while. Then I was promoted to sergeant. I went to Capitol Hill, and I was a patrol sergeant in our first district, which is Capitol Hill, historic downtown Capitol Hill, kind of what you think of the quintessential D.C. area.
Right.
Really cool experience. There was an opening at the academy to be a recruit sergeant. After 3 years in the first district, Capitol Hill, I spent a year at the police academy doing initial recruit training.
Nice.
Pretty cool experience
That
to be a part of that.
Oh, yeah.
And then I saw aviation open up, and I've always had an interest in aviation. I've always thought that was really just one of the coolest aspects of really life. I think flying's incredible.
Yeah.
Didn't think I'd have that much of a chance because I don't come from an aviation background. Didn't really know much about it, but put in, thought I'd give it a whirl, ended up getting selected, and it's been the most incredible 6 years I've had in my career. Wow. In terms of just learning, the experience, the mission, the job in general is
Pretty
really
unique, isn't it?
It's pretty unique. It's an awesome place to be.
Well, they obviously picked you because they liked what they saw and all those other things you just listed. But let me stop you and go, you went blowing by it, but I want to know, tell me about Army. What'd you do in the Army?
I was in the infantry, so I was in the 82nd Airborne in the Army. So we were, in and around aircraft and aviation to that nature. Seeing it from sitting in the back seat and not really knowing what was going on in the front seat, it was always fascinating. And, you'd get mission briefings during training and you'd see the pilots come in. I always kind of had this amazing thought of what it was.
Sure.
So to come here and just see they're actually human beings, just like that, it's been kind of a downfall. I really had such a high opinion of pilots until I met them.
Semi-guys. First semi-guys.
Oh, my gosh. How long were you in the Army?
I was in the Army for 3.5 years.
Okay. And I don't know the time period, so any deployments?
Yeah, I was in Iraq. I served in Iraq. And then, like I said, when I came back from there, I was kind of just in the not having a job, trying to figure out what my next move was going to be.
Until a bus drove by.
And I will say, that bus pointed me in the right direction, I guess.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was a cool. I'd look back on that when it came by. It was a joke. Like, I guess I'll apply. I never thought about being a cop.
That's great. Well, I particularly appreciate airborne. My dad was 82nd Airborne.
Awesome.
And my son was 173rd Airborne.
Okay.
I just did the cop route, but I didn't jump out of perfectly good aircraft. But did you get the opportunity to jump out of helicopters?
Blackhawks. We did UH-60.
I was hoping you were going to say, "Oh yeah, we did," because not everybody in airborne gets that opportunity. I mean, if you stay long enough, you do, but you did.
It just depends if you hit a good training cycle when they're training the guys on the 60s. It's really just how that works out.
Was that cool?
It was really cool.
Yeah.
It was really cool. The C-130s are still the best.
Really? That's your favorite?
I think the C-130s
Yeah.
are the best.
So why didn't you like the C-17? I know why, but I want
the extra step.
Yeah, because
it gives you a little more of the thought.
Yes, it's really it's moving faster, right? And I mean, it's a little bit.
It's just such a big configuration. It doesn't feel as you're as much in tune with the aircraft.
Well, cool. That's great. That is great.
Of all the times we've talked through people's assignments, You brought up an assignment that I haven't heard mentioned before, at least in the way that you mentioned it. You said you were part of the civil disturbance, less lethal munitions detail. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. MPD's obviously, I believe, hands down the best civil disturbance 1A department in the entire nation, if not the world, just in terms of what we deal with on a daily basis with lawful protests, permitted protests, national events that pop up. We got the UN here. We've got nation summits. I mean, there's just so many 1A events that occur in Washington, D.C. This is really the pinnacle of civil disturbance. So to get a chance to be with those guys and do that day in and day out and learn from them. And then, you got the other side of that. D.C.'s also has sometimes during unrest, this is where you see it happen the most.
Right.
And to get a chance to get the experience to be a part of a unit that I believe is probably one of the more storied histories in civil disturbance.
I mean, no city has the number of people that show up for protests over the decades. Yeah. I mean, U.S. Park Police and D.C. Metro both had to be at the top of their games in that area, just to, even for the normal things, filling the mall filled with people, where there's hundreds of thousands of people that has the potential to go sideways. And so that's interesting that they had a whole unit dedicated to that. I'm not surprised. I'm surprised I didn't know it. That was probably interesting work.
It's top notch, and the people that work over there are the best in the business, just in terms of knowledge of less lethal munitions. The deployments that we have had during riotous events here, we don't have the same issues where there's misuse of stuff causing serious injuries and death. I believe this place really does the best at not only the peaceful and permitted one, but also things that do turn riotous and become violent. I believe this is that place for the nation.
You should be proud of that.
He's a humble guy.
I'm getting that feeling because I keep getting prompted from Mr. Chittick here going, hey, ask about that Army, because that's good. You have an interesting background.
When you came out of civil disturbance, came here, right? You kind of worked at both of them when you first got into
is that right?
And then in 2020 is when we had a lot of.
And it was cool because I was while on the ground with civil disturbance, doing the less lethal stuff for the 2020 riots into 2021, being able to coordinate with Kevin and the aviation guys that were in section that day to get pictures, to get us just how big the crowd actually was. When you see something on the ground, you think there's 500, 600, 700 people in a block. You get the aerial photo and you see really there's only 150. They're just very close up to the line, and it's giving you a deceptive perception. It added a whole nother element to what I knew of civil disturbance, just having the immediate, let me get those pictures sent, let me get a real aviation assessment of what's going on. And it changed tactics sometimes with how we move people down and out of the block, finding fires that were being lit and being able to send.
What direction you send them, all that stuff.
Safe ingress routes, egress routes.
Now, was that just still photos that you were getting texted to you?
We were getting texted photos from us. Basically, the quickest way to get it was we were getting, leaning out iPhone photos, getting video of where the event was taking place, putting that over our police radio. They were getting it out, and we were making tactical decisions based on what they were putting down real time. It was cool to see that, and it had been the first time I'd been, utilized aviation during the civil disturbance. Totally different aspect.
Great value, isn't it?
Amazing value.
Yeah, it is. So you weren't close enough that you could airdrop them? No, Kevin?
He was ready to go. He's, January 6th, he was on the front line for that.
Wow.
And you were directing, you and Commander Glover were directing the airborne unit, or our air support unit, rather, on what to do.
Just to, get see which sides we have the most influx of people, if there's openings, how the situation actually looks. Like I said, when you're really in it, you just see the 3-inch in front of you picture. Right. But to get an aviation shot of that and an aerial overview 360 really changes, okay, this is where we're at, this is what we're actually dealing with, and this is the legitimate crowd size instead of what we think is way higher.
Right.
Sometimes doesn't work out that way.
That's interesting.
We've talked about this a few times before, but not to this level of detail as far as bringing someone into aviation that has that level of experience and being able to coordinate movements on the ground with these types of incidents. And man, you just encapsulated that conversation beautifully. But what a great asset you are for this unit and this area to have the experience you had on the ground and now put you in an elevated platform to be able to make those decisions and relay that information that you know is important. We talk about the value of bringing folks up that have surveillance experience because it lends to those surveillance environments and be able to tell guys, hey, take this next block to pick up egress, and just, but that on this level is so much more important, So really cool that you were able to take that experience and then now deploy that information from an airborne position. So cool.
Yeah. Have you been in the position where you've been over something now?
Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit airbus.com for more information.
Yes. And that's been cool to help the guys that I came up with and are still there be like, hey, look, this is what you're actually dealing with. Or, you'll get a crowd assessment from the ground and we'll go up. I guess an example, we just had a extraordinarily large, obviously with everything going on with Israel, Palestine, we have one weekend we'll have an Israel rally, the next we'll have a Palestinian rally. During one of the Palestinian rallies, Secret Service had their Ballard gates up and there was a demo trying to make their way into Lafayette Park and it just started bottlenecking and you get a call, hey, what is going on 17th Street?
Yeah.
Just being able to look like, hey, look, we've got 3 Ballards up. They're only getting by 2 by 2 for 30,000 people. It's going to be a while.
Yeah.
There's nothing happening. You've just got that bottleneck. And when you're on the ground, there's no way you're going to see what's going on. So to be able to help them, as much as we can from the air is a real asset because what those guys do is a tremendous job.
And I guarantee you that many of those guys recognize your voice and they know, hey, that's Danny. And he was one of us. Does that happen? They trust you.
I hope so.
Well, I'm sure they do. I went from K9 to air support. That happened in K9. I mean, we just would talk on, and they'd say, oh, that's Jack. And I go, oh, that's Jim. And it just helped that where there was a trust. If I said, hey, you might want to do this, they'd just do it.
Right.
They wouldn't go, oh, who is this? What are they talking about? No, they just said, oh, he was one of us, a few months ago.
Right.
Yeah.
That probably comes into play more than you think, Danny. I bet it does.
With anything law enforcement, bringing whatever experiences you gain from any specialized assignment or patrol and being able to relay that to others and guys, I think you bring a different or unique perspective to aviation.
I agree.
The other part of that's cool is those guys well enough to know if their voice intonation is different, something's wrong or something is right, depending on what they're saying and how they're saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, I guess the hardest part was getting used to, you'd hear the influx in the voice and something would be going on. And I had, my first couple of years here, the desire to be, oh my gosh, I wish that I was there because I'm just so used to being on the ground. I sometimes almost felt guilty to be like, man, I'm telling you what's going on. I'm completely okay. And it's hard. It was a tough transition to not be able to be there to see the guys that I know and love possibly need me. And I'm helping in a different way.
Oh, you certainly are.
Yeah.
I mean, don't ever doubt the amount of safety that you're adding to your brothers and sisters down there from the air. I mean, but I understand that. I remember feeling that, going, oh, that would be a good one to be involved in. Not all of them.
Not all.
But some of them where you just said, man, put me on the deck right now. I want to go on that search team.
Yeah.
But I was being a value in a different way. And
Absolutely.
That's how you just have to look at it.
The other thing that's funny sometimes too is the little things that you notice, like, your guys are down there sweating their tails off with their vests and everything, and you're in the air-conditioned Daystar, and you're like, oh, I'm actually a little cold. I'm going to turn the vent.
I can't say that's a bad aspect of aviation.
It's not. So sitting quietly over here is pilot Kevin Chittick. And I will just tell you, I've known Kevin a long time. Through ALIA, now APSA.
Yep.
We've met many, many years ago when you were with a different agency, but I'll let you get to that. Kevin, walk us through where you grew up, how you ended up as a U.S. Park Police officer, and then how you ended up here. How'd that work?
I grew up in Montgomery County, which is just the county outside of the city. My dad was with U.S. Park Police. He helped found that unit, the aviation unit. So I was around aviation pretty much my whole life. He flew fixed wing prior to flying helicopters. So we, as even a kindergarten, we're flying around in a fixed wing. So something I've always wanted to do is fly. I was lucky enough to get hired at 21, came on. I didn't have the experience that young Danny had. He's really being humble. He's not really opening up to all the things he did. But I was going to community college, kind of the same deal as him. So I put in for Montgomery County Police, the Metropolitan Police, and the Park Police. Park Police called me first. Went down to Georgia, spent 4 months in Georgia. Got out of that, went to patrol, did 2 years in patrol. Then I went up as a dispatcher for a year, and then I went to motors for 2 years. And then I got hired for accepted into the aviation unit as what they call a rescue technician, which is a paramedic.
Right.
TFO does all the tactical flight officer stuff. So they have a FLIR, all the whole 9 yards. They did medevac, and they did hoist rescues. Rappel deployment. We never did that other than training. That was more of a training thing. They ended up sending me down to Fort Rucker in 94. And in 93 is when they accepted me in there. In 94, they sent me to Fort Rucker to learn how to fly. And in 95, I graduated.
Yeah.
And in 98 is when they cut me loose as a pilot. So it took about 5 years, to become a pilot there. And spent the next 20 years flying for them.
Yeah. And what were you flying over there? What airframes?
The Bell 412 is the main one that they have in the 206L.
Yep.
L3. And the fine aircraft for what their mission is. And their mission isn't just law enforcement. It's all these extra stuff. I can't say enough about the 412. It's a great piece of equipment for what they're using it for.
Right.
Right.
And then you spent your time there and you retired from the U.S. Park Police.
That's correct.
So what happened next that you end up here?
Another advertisement came up.
Was it on a bus? Yeah. This one was on a billboard at a Capitals game.
MPD's capitalizing right now.
Yes. So I signed the recruitment and came over. And it's been, one of my best friends, I told you off the air there, when I went to Fort Rucker, there was an MPD officer that was there before me. He's about 6 weeks ahead of me in class. And he pretty much greeted me from probably the first week that I was there. Yeah. I was literally living above him in the barracks or BOQs. So he yelled down, "Hey, you're from Maryland. You get the Maryland tags in your car. Who do you work for?" Yeah. And he knew I was coming. I didn't know he was down there. So, and I didn't know him prior to that.
Right.
But he was kind of like a big brother to me throughout that whole process because, you're down there by yourself. You're the only civilian in your class. And there's 48 of you. They split you in two. I think it was 48. Split you in two, so you're on flight line, you're in classroom, and then you switch over.
Yeah.
Yep. So that was it. Down there for 10 months, going through flight school with the Army guys, all Army. And my class was all West Pointers. Wow. All the officers were West Point, but one, Joe Scraga, who is another good friend of mine. Keep in touch with Joe. He's retired now up in Minnesota, but he went to St. Joseph's, I believe, up in New York.
Yeah.
He graduated like a day before the West Point guys. So he ends up he's the only guy there, college graduate that was down there that was not a West Pointer. So he ended up being the class leader.
Yeah.
He was a great guy. And you become friends with these guys.
Sure.
And it really, for me, I wasn't in the military like Danny. It really shows you how the quality of people that are in that. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Especially from West Point.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So we were talking earlier. Tell us about your first day. First day, you're a civilian, a law enforcement pilot.
Right.
At
on a
Fort
military
Rucker,
base. Right,
at UCLA. Upper corner of Lower Alabama.
That's about right.
Alan Mack just shared that with us, and I can't get it out of my head. I love it so much.
I wasn't sure what to expect. I went and saw the coordinator just the day before. He says, "Yeah, you're gonna have to show up in classroom, C and building 36, and you'll meet the rest of the class." I said, "Okay." I didn't think to ask him how I should dress or anything. So I kind of showed up a college kid. Yeah, I was set up with orange shorts and I think like an aqua colored shirt. I was like a beach bum kind of. Oh my God. It was a beautiful day. in Alabama, it's a good time to be there.
Now this is back in '94. You said.
Yes.
I mean,
I'm sorry, it was August '94. Yeah.
Yeah, but that must have been something.
Probably wasn't very hot.
Yeah,
that
the colonel was surprised. He knew there was something special about that kid.
Yeah, something special. All right. Come here, you. What did you wear the next day, Kevin?
I think I wore khakis and a polo shirt.
Oh my gosh. That
and
is
then
a great story.
and then they issue you a flight suit, and then from then on you're in a flight suit. So.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to back up for those that don't know. You mentioned you went to Georgia. That's FLETC.
Correct.
Tell us, what's FLETC for U.S. Park Police? What's the connection, and what's FLETC in Georgia?
It's simply it's a police academy for the federal government. So Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Prisons, Capitol Police, U.S. Secret Service, a multitude of different law enforcement agencies go down there for their initial training.
Right.
So basically, you learn, like any other academy, the traffic stops, the law, what's the law in your neck of the woods. So we learned DC law, federal law. You went in the skid pan, learned driver training, takedowns, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So you spent 4 months down there doing that, and then you come back up here and you do another 3 months of, riding around with one of the senior guys.
Yeah.
And then you get all your extras, radar detector, or radar certification and breathalyzer and all that other stuff that you do.
Federal government is so unique in that, we all think about our local police academy. Here you went to Alabama for one training. You went to Georgia for another training, even though you're working in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
It's very unique to a lot of people in law enforcement that they're going, wow, you got to travel a lot just to get trained.
Yeah.
That's really it's unusual, but not for federal government law enforcement. It's not unusual.
Nationwide. I mean, some of the missions you end up going on because they're looking for bodies, basically. And Philadelphia, they had the Republican National Convention. I'm trying to remember. I think it was 98. It was right when I became a pilot. I went up there as an officer, and then I'm sorry. That first time I went up there as an officer, I can't remember what the first one was. Something at Independence Hall. The second time I went up there, it was Dole was running for president, and they were doing the Republican National Convention there. So we were doing like kind of security with the Philadelphia PD. We checked in with them every day. Kevin Lee, I know you know Kevin.
Oh yeah, Kevin. Yeah,
Kevin was there at the time. It was a good time in a new city, and those guys treated us right.
Did you do a lot of that in Park Police, where you went to other cities to back up to bolster the numbers?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Sort of, I guess. Because it's such a unique place over there. They do. They're part of the Park Service, so they're doing park stuff. We had a forest fire in Shenandoah National Park, so we went out there, and we don't have any like a belly water drop thing or anything like that. But we went up there as a medevac aircraft. So if any firefighter or anyone else got hurt or something like that, we would respond and take them. Well, we were just kind of hanging around, and in those fires, there's a lot of privateers that come in and do a lot of the work. It's contracted work.
Right.
And, the government and private, you can't, if it's a private thing, and it's a big thing with medevac right now, it's, they're saying the government's overstepping its bounds.
Right.
Going into the private sector doing work, right? So we didn't want to upset the apple cart there in Shenandoah, but they wanted us to do a perimeter flight every day where the fire is. So as it's getting bigger and bigger, and which direction the wind's blowing, and they could, get all the different ground troops where they needed to be to fight this thing.
Sure.
So that was kind of that was an interesting one. Went down to New Orleans for the Hurricane Katrina that hit.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't the pilot that went down there. I was two of the other guys over Park Police did that, and I'm sure you're going to talk to those guys.
Yeah.
They'll tell you all about that.
As a matter of fact, what you can't see is that when Kevin talks about the Park Police Aviation, he's pointing over my shoulder because it's right across the river where U.S. Park Police has their hangar. Yeah. It's a very busy helicopter corridor here, as we have found out. And you spent a lot of time, a couple decades in that hangar. And your dad, you probably spent time there as a child too, with your dad being there. How long was your dad in that unit?
Dad wasn't in there long. He's 73 to 76, and he retired in 83. He got promoted to captain in 76. He moved the family to Boston for 2 years.
Okay.
So from 76 to 78, and that's 10 to 12 for me.
But in that 2 years, he did a lot over there.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
We talked about that, the hangar.
Yeah. So he had come out. We talked earlier, right? He was in the planning section. There was a sergeant that had put in for Korean helicopters. This is back in the 50s.
Yeah.
That were over here at Bowling Air Force Base. And the chief know, hey, there's a military surplus that they're trying to get rid of. You should try and get some for the Park Police. And that chief was not like progressive-minded thinking. I think NYPD, there wasn't LAPD may have had a unit in the 50s. There wasn't a whole lot.
There wasn't. There wasn't.
A unit, and Park Police was a really small unit. There were 200 guys, I think, back then. In '73, they started hiring a lot because the bicentennial was coming up. They also added San Francisco and New York for outposts for the Park Police. So it went from 200 and something to 600, almost 700 guys, which is still not a huge department compared to most of the cities. But for other departments, it's a fairly large department.
Yeah.
And my dad said, hey, we should get a helicopter. And Chief Wells at the time, this is 1972, I believe, said, yep, Chittick, I think you're right. Go find me a helicopter.
Wow.
And your budget is zero.
Wow.
So he went out and got all the numbers and came back, and one of the guys in finance, I wish he was here to tell you the story because I don't know all the details, but he's like, we could probably scrunch here. And, he's mixing the numbers up because police officers were the finance guys. I mean, that's how it was back in those days. Ended up getting the helicopter and then getting another one I think it was a year later.
What airframe was that?
It was a Bell 206B model.
Bs.
Yep. The first two were Bs, and then they went to Ls. Yep. And first one was a low skid gear. There was three pilots. One of them was a Navy pilot, and he said, hey, listen, we want a low skid gear to take off and land because of ETL and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, they're doing, off-scene landings and stuff. Having low skid gear is not the best thing to have.
No.
So the second one they got was high skid gear, and because they were doing medevacs at that time.
Yeah. Wow.
But that was 1973.
That is great. Did you think you were going to end up there? I mean, was that when you were there as a kid? Did you, in your wildest dreams, did you say, I want to be here someday?
Well, so when my dad went through training, he went down to the Bell plant. Back then, they were still building them there in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
So, 10, I loved the military. I loved military aircraft. And they had Cobras coming through, right? They hadn't been painted yet. They're still that aluminum.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait to be a Cobra pilot.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to be a Cobra pilot so bad. They give you all this propaganda as a kid going through that thing. So I had all that little pictures and stuff. And my cousin, who I didn't tell you, he was a West Pointer. He ended up going into the SEAL team and retired. He's a year older than I am. So we used to get together and do all this military stuff. But anyway, I thought about being a pilot from when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how I was going to do it because it wasn't, it's not a cheap endeavor to go into other things.
Right.
So I really lucked out coming on the Park Police because they paid for everything.
Yes. Yeah.
So
even in your orange shorts and aqua shirt.
I got through. Jack, I got through somehow.
I just want to touch on something real quick. You talked about your dad basically founding the aviation unit with the Park Police, and I think back to that famous rescue.
Oh yeah,
the Park Police were a part of. And I think that would have never happened had it not been for your dad's vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that helicopter that is in the museum hanging, right?
Yes, sir.
And the legacy that your dad created through that vision he had is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And here you are as a second generation pilot.
Right.
That's amazing.
I feel like having Kevin is his greatest legacy here.
Oh yeah,
I've been flying unbelievable. That's the biggest return on investment for flying you can get.
He did 3 years that unit, and I ended up doing I think I did 25 total.
Wow.
Come on, Dad, I'm the guy.
I got the helicopters and their most senior pilot. One swoop.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
That's a great point, John. I mean, just that event alone, and they were, U.S. Park Police Aviation has been involved in tens of thousands of incidents.
Yes.
But talk about saving lives and high profile, and without the initial vision, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else goes.
Right.
Maybe they don't. I'm sure we're going to talk to U.S. Park Police about that event, and because it's a big part of their history. And like John said, that exact aircraft is sitting in the Law Enforcement Memorial.
That's correct.
Yep. We're going to head over there and take a look. But let's go back to where we are. We're the nation's capital, and Danny, tell us about Washington, D.C. What how big is it? How many people? And lead us through that, the basics of that.
First of all, thank you for the sound effects.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, the ambulance coming across the bridge.
ambulance, helicopters. John, push that button again, John. John has sound effects.
Yeah,
on
the
this.
ambient noise here. DC's a small, big city, as kind of how I describe it.
Yes.
There's about 700,000 residents of the city day in and day out. Obviously, daily and weekends, it can go up to 1.3 million or higher.
Oh.
So yeah, you can get almost a 60% increase in influx
That's
just
amazing.
between people working here, visiting events, everything that does occur here. a 68 square mile city.
Wow.
So it's not huge. It's not horribly dense like New York or LA, even Phoenix, where you guys are used to. I think there was a building moratorium. I'm not sure if it's lifted or not, that nothing could be higher than the Washington Monument.
Okay.
So there's not a lot of high-rise buildings in the city spread out. You got a lot of residential areas.
Yeah.
You've also got, a lot of historical and monument areas as
Yeah.
well. But there's more to D.C. I think the biggest misconception is it's the monuments and it's the things downtown in the mall. But D.C.'s just got such a vibrant, so many different areas and cultural epicenters that do exist here.
And there's multiple sports arenas, stadiums.
Not a lot of winners. We got the Caps and the Nats. For many, many years, this place has not been the sports place.
Well, but you've got that to contend with.
We do.
As a police department, even as an aviation unit within this area. There's military. Is there any military bases within the city limits?
Yes, we've got Fort McNair. We've got Bowling Air Force Base. You've got the Washington Navy Yard.
Yeah.
And then
Marine Corps Barracks.
Marine Corps Barracks, Washington.
That's the 8th and I, right?
8th and I.
Okay.
And we've got Coast Guard headquarters.
Jeez.
Got DHS headquarters. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a tremendous amount of stuff that's going on in D.C.
Yeah.
Just on top of the regular stuff. It's a federal city as well as a local city.
The Navy Yard that you mentioned, there was a active shooter there. How long ago? What year was that?
2013, September.
Yeah.
Park Police did a bucket rescue off the roof of that.
Yes. And that's almost within view here, isn't it?
Yeah,
It
right,
is.
right underneath the bridge, you see the two smokestacks,
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
and that building with the air conditioning units, you see just beyond. That's the building.
Yeah. I mean, everything's so
Close, yeah.
condensed. There's so many things and targeted. I mean, we don't like to call them targets, of course, but we know in reality, there's a lot to consider in that realm for
Tremendous
terrorist
amount of
attacks in the
critical
city.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's a massive amount of critical infrastructure.
I mean, and on top of bridges and the normal stuff, we've got embassies.
And we've got Embassy Row.
You've got
also
all that.
dignitary movements, presidential escorts. I mean, the city's bustling with a tremendous amount of events and critical sites.
Yeah. Your police department, anything that you can think of that other than what you talked about earlier with the crowd control and this lethal, are there any other unusual things within the police department because of where we are?
I think our motor escort unit's quite unusual.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys are doing, escorts daily for the VP and the president. Those guys are also top notch. That's another thing. I've got to say, coming from the civil disturbance, I got to give.
Sure.
That's the premier unit, in my opinion, of the agency. But our motor unit, is something that you wouldn't typically see in a big city. They're not just a traffic motor unit.
Right.
Those guys are doing presidential escorts, and they are an asset to the Secret Service.
Oh, heck yeah.
Absolute asset.
How I don't want to put you on the spot. How big is that unit? Do you know?
Oof. They used to have a lot more, I believe. I think they've got 20-something motors, 25-something motors.
But they're, I mean,
So active. Those guys work their butts off.
You spend 20 minutes in this city, and you see a motorcade, they stay very, very busy.
That is an active unit. Those guys are incredibly hard workers.
And I may or may not have seen one of those motorcade escorts in the pouring rain from a van years ago, Mr. Chittick, that led us to that hangar across the river. I was telling these guys that story. I was at an ALEA event, and remember that? It was
I do.
pouring rain, and those motors, man, they got us there in a tenth of the time.
This is rush hour.
And they
Evening rush hour.
were soaking wet.
Those guys are driving in every kind of weather.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
There was lightning bolts hitting. I was like, oh my gosh. And every one of us went up and shook every one of their hands and put them to the front of the food line. I remember vividly, Glenn Daly was there with us. And Glenn and I were scared. I mean, we were like watching them and just going, I can't believe these guys, how good they are. You could tell the skill.
Unbelievable.
You could see it. And that impressed me.
That
really
school
impressed
is
me.
apparently one of the hardest schools
I
there
believe
is.
so.
Those guys do some
Yeah.
amazing things with those bikes.
I
There's
believe
a
it.
60 right there.
Yeah, we got a 60 going by on the route, and that's the route that's
one.
used for raiding.
Well, it's think of the highway in the city.
Okay.
So Route 1, it's trying for noise abatement and control around the airport.
Yeah.
So that we know that not going to get in the flight path of the big boys.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
Route 1 comes down the Anacostia River and hits Haynes Point just south of us, and then heads northwest back up the Potomac River.
And are we in Reagan airspace right here?
Oh, yeah. The whole city is.
The whole city is within Reagan's airspace.
So Reagan's pretty much directly behind us right now.
Right. Wow. Jeez. So from the time you take off, you're checking in with Reagan Tower.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're constantly talking.
And you're with them
always.
And you're with them the entire flight most of the time?
I would say 99% of the time. You'll get a chase that may go outside of the Class B.
Yeah.
And then you got Andrews to the east. So if you're going from one B to another B, just continuing with Andrews. That's generally where it's going that way. Usually it doesn't go to the north or to the west.
Right.
Occasionally, but
we're gonna come back to airspace in a little bit in detail. But unless you want to hit it now,
Well,
what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. We just interviewed Fairfax County, and talking to them, they're like, this is the world's most restrictive airspace, arguably, right?
Right.
And you talk to them, they're like, it's not a big deal because you fly in it all the time. But to an outsider looking at your airspace, I'm like, holy cow, how do you operate in that area? And you're like, you just get used to it.
Right.
But you've been flying in this airspace for 38 years, is that?
Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details.
I've been a pilot since '98 in DC.
Okay.
I started in '93 as a rescue technician.
Okay.
Yeah.
But man,
That's a long time.
But that was all before, all the, there was some restriction with P-56 and Alpha and Bravo, then P-70 down south, which is around the Mount Vernon.
Right.
P-73, I think it is. But once 9/11 happened, it really got tight. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
So, as a matter of fact, this heliport just opened up that year, 2001. And when that event happened, this place is lucky to still survive.
Wow!
Because it was going to make its money on traffic coming from New York to come to DC to go up on the hill and do their
you can
test
see the
fire.
Capitol when we go out there. If you just look north, the U.S. Capitol's just right there.
It's 12, 13 blocks
location.
Yeah. And we're even closer to a place that you spend a lot of time at. I noticed.
What's that?
There's a baseball field. Right.
Oh, that stage. Yeah.
I know you're a big fan.
This is a tough year. Another tough year for us.
You're loyal though.
Yeah,
you're a loyal fan.
I'll be there.
I was telling these guys. I said, "Oh my gosh, look how close they are to the baseball field. I know where Kevin parks."
That's right.
Because it's right there.
Yep.
It's right there.
But we were talking about airspace.
Yeah.
And so occasionally, like P-56, you generally don't go into.
What is that?
Prohibited airspace number 56 covers the Capitol building, the White House, and then that's Alpha. And then there's a Bravo, the P-56 Alpha and Bravo.
Okay.
This is VP's house, which is the Naval Observatory.
Okay.
So typically you don't go in there. I mean, on a typical flight, we're not going in there.
No matter what?
No matter what.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you have some type of criminal activity, or there's a special event.
Large demos, that's where we live in P-56, yeah.
But I'm going to throw in a hypothetical out there, which is not out of the realm. Officer down in the park.
You're going in.
At White House, and there's shots being fired. You can go in there.
Right.
What does that take? What's the process?
Well, Capitol Police, there was 2 officers that were shot and killed, and we did the medevac on that. That was with one of those U.S. Park Police, and we landed literally right next to the Capitol building.
Right. I remember seeing pictures of that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so on those type of things, you're going to get right in there because Secret Service is going to call you or Capitol Police is going to call you, and they're the ones that control what they consider inner P-56 or the exclusionary zone. So you have P-56, then you have the exclusionary zone inside of that, which is, in the area around the White House and that area around the Capitol building that you definitely don't go in, especially if like Congress is in session, President's in the House. Now,
but now you have this officer down.
Yeah.
Who are you talking to? Secret Service? Is that who is the final saying yes, you can land at the Capitol to pick up those Capitol police officers?
It's Secret Service and Capitol. It's kind of a coordination center. It's in Reston. Actually, that's NCRCC.
But when we're on the ground, if it's a pre-planned mission, we just call them.
Yeah, it's the U.S. Secret Service jock.
Yeah.
So it's a command post.
It's like a watch center, basically.
Yep.
But in the air, we've got to go through tower. Tower then has to call the watch center. It's a little bit of a process.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if we're in the air,
we're
going to call tower. The tower's going to make that phone call.
Tower does it. Wow.
Yeah, we'll
so
call
the
tower.
tower's in on it.
They give us permission.
Yeah, they get the
So you're telling the tower about police stuff.
Yes.
And saying, hey, this is what we got. This is why we need to be there.
Yes.
And we're requesting.
Yes.
Because it's a tower. You're requesting to do that. And they get the permission from Secret Service that says, Roger, tell them they're good.
But
tower gets back to you and you go.
Not that simple. We can wait. Sometimes you watch, something going on and you're sitting on the outskirts.
Yes.
Sitting in a hover, just watching it go until we're cleared to go into the airspace.
They need to talk to me. I'll simplify that whole thing. I knew it wasn't going to be simple, but that's the process.
Yeah.
But
Very
when
interesting.
we're on the ground, though, it is, hey, we're requesting. They'll give us permission. We'll let them know to tower that we are cleared for that airspace and we can go right in.
That's where I think you talk about mission equipment and how valuable that mission equipment becomes in those scenarios.
Yeah.
I don't know what your restrictions are with altitudes, but you can always climb and veer away and get some eyes on with the mission equipment. Then that becomes so valuable.
And crew resource management comes into play. If I know a chase is going that way or I think it's going that way, hey, Kevin, call for P56.
Yeah.
Let's just get the ball rolling on that. So we're not going to be, playing catch
Just
up.
in case.
And we're cleared even if we don't utilize it when they go that route. I already know I'm covered, and that's where we can work as a crew up there to get us in.
And is it pretty typically a yes?
Yes.
Or okay,
Oh,
so
they're
it's not.
great.
We'll get back to you. It's our no, not tonight. It's
If Washington Tower's listening to this, we appreciate their.
I know you do.
That's
I know you do.
We really do. Those guys are. We always call them afterward and let them know, hey, we had X, Y, Z. Thank you so much. This was the outcome. So that they know, hey, look, this is what they did. And they are a part of that because getting us into that restricted airspace that quickly is a huge asset. We couldn't do it without them and their quickness.
And it's like 90% of the
They're so good.
It's quite a bit of carjackings now and armed robberies,
Right.
that type of activity.
The minute and a half
The alley that they go through is right through P56. So,
there's a
like you
tunnel
said,
that they like to go through.
Oh, really?
Because clearly that's where we get in. That's inside of P56.
So it's almost every time you're going to go up.
We're going.
So that's why you front load it.
Front loaded. You got to
from experience.
think from the TFO side, and the crew just has to say, this is a good potential. If we get on this car, it's going through P56 Alpha.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and just get permission here.
I love that Danny said they tell them the outcome. I've always told people to do that.
Yeah.
I've been on surveillances where they've allowed us to do something that they probably shouldn't allow us to do, but they do.
Right.
And we watch a robbery in progress, and we follow them away, and they're taken into custody. We say, hey, SoCal, you get an assist on that.
Yeah.
2 robbery suspects in custody. They're going to
Absolutely.
jail. And they'll get back. Everybody okay? All the officers okay? Absolutely.
Yep.
I mean, and it keeps them in the game.
And nothing we're doing is top secret. There's nothing
Exactly.
people can't know.
Exactly.
It's public knowledge.
It's public
and,
knowledge.
and they should be informed that they helped on the case.
And
what
they feel
happened.
good about it.
Absolutely.
And the next time you ask, come on in.
Absolutely.
That's
Come on in.
Hey, we want the reputation that we play well with Tower, and they're part of our team. We're all in the same ecosystem here.
One of the other things is when you're in a pursuit, because you don't know where you're going to go. And in the city, you're talking to Class B. You got to talk to Tower on everything you do.
All right.
The city is basically wrapped up in like a pie. You got zones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 1 is kind of weird, just in the middle of the P56. It encompasses that. Once you get outside of that, you have Class 2 right above us. Class 3 is on this side of the river. Class 4 is south of Wilson Bridge. Class 5 is to the west in Virginia. And then Class 6 attaches to 5 out in Virginia. This is after 9/11. It goes out to 14 miles now.
Wow.
And then Class 7 is in Montgomery County to the northwest in Maryland and goes out to 14 miles. So it's instead of being 7 miles, typically they're 7 miles.
Right.
It's 14 miles. So they want to know what district you're in or what zone you're in or route. But in the pursuit, you don't know where you're going to go.
Right.
So let them know. Say, hey,
Yeah.
hey, we're in a vehicle pursuit. And they'll watch out for you is what I'm saying.
Right.
You've seen how many muscles have come in here.
Yeah.
Muscle helicopters there, first helo for Air Force. You have the Marines, which are right behind us here. Marine 1 and 2, they're Nighthawks, typically. They're flying around every day.
Yeah.
We haven't seen them yet today. Coast Guard, we just saw them go by.
Yeah.
Fort Belvoir was that Black Hawk that just flew by. Just the last one that flew by.
Yeah.
So you have and then you have the medevac on top of that. There's not a lot because we don't have any civilian stuff flying around here.
Right.
Just freelance.
That's really unique to us because for us, it was all the civilian stuff that we were dodging and talking to, and including, lots of media. So there's no media helicopters over Washington.
They're
DC.
not allowed in, but, if we ride outside the Beltway and it's a big caper or something like that, then we do have to contend with them. I think in my 6 years, it's been 3 or 4 flights where we've had
That's
to go
interesting.
air to air with them.
You brought up something I want to touch on because I think it's really important. CRM. You brought up CRM, and we talk about this a lot as it relates to programs that have civilian pilots. And you guys are unique. You've got a mix of civilian pilots with sworn pilots. You're very unique in that you were a sworn pilot now flying
Civilian.
You're flying civilian now.
Yeah. There was two, me and another one, Jeff Hertel, who's also with U.S. Park Police, came over here. The rest of them are civilians. One's a tuna boat pilot. One's
Tour guide.
military.
It's the crew resource management is definitely different. And like it is with anything, pilot to pilot, you're going to have different levels of comfort, experience, law enforcement background, and all that. And, you get to know your partner and you know what the communication needs to be, what the style needs to be, and how we handle each mission. And I think from the start, I was kind of partnered with Kevin just the way it all went down. So I've learned a tremendous amount coming from zero aviation experience to having a guy with 30-something years. I learned crew resource management, how to talk inside the cockpit, what to look for, how to be, and he kind of instilled his time in the air upon me.
Yeah. Very valuable.
It is very valuable. But then you can take that, and then when I ride with the civilian pilots that we have that don't have law enforcement, I know what the pilot's thinking from his perspective, and it really closes that loop for us.
Right.
Yeah. It's definitely, you have a train of thought of how you think of things. I knew you put on a class that I sat in. Every time I ever went to ALE, no, it's APSA, but I would always go to your class.
Yes, you
had so much insight
Yeah.
that was so helpful.
Okay, crew resource management really is the whole mission.
Yeah.
You can't do enough of it.
But you were talking about, how do we get our recruits to come in? We had a K9 guy. I think he was one of your good friends that came in one of your stores. Anyway, you have these different guys that come in with different personalities that think differently than you do and may not be the perfect fit. Right. But unfortunately, with us, because they're not sworn officers, I can't kick him back into the department someplace because that's where he's coming from in the first place. We have, we hire the guy as a pilot. He's going to be our pilot.
Yeah.
And then we got to try and get him, trained up to
to the level where it's going to be safe, it's going to be effective.
Yes.
All that.
I think this airspace and your mission highlights the importance of CRM more than probably any other agency I've ever talked to.
Absolutely.
Especially for you in that TFO seat. Because a lot of times there's a mutual understanding of the mission. In this situation, it may not always be that way. So the pressure is on you in a lot of these circumstances, I'm imagining, where you see the way a pursuit's headed, and you've got to think ahead as, not just as the pilot, but as an aircrew member, and be like, hey, you might want to think about P-54.
I mean, we've had Marine One coming on a flight path in on us, and we're in the middle of a pursuit, and we're call operational. The tower can, deviate Marine One or deviate the pursuit.
Wow.
And we've had times where we have been able to continue pursuits. It's been pretty cool, but the in-cockpit communication, I'm trying to tell the pilot where to go. I'm talking to the air to air.
Yeah.
I right now don't have time to think about this pursuit. Like there's you got, the most important helicopter in the world flying in the airspace. You might think what you have is important, but when you step out of the cockpit, it's not.
It's not to the FAA. It's not to the tower.
Secret Service.
No. It certainly isn't to Secret Service.
But, as a left seater, you get sucked into, I want, the mission to be my priority right now. Yeah. And then, you get the pilot, that's not the priority right now. We're coordinating,
The CRM popped out to me too, John, and I started thinking about this when you said there's 7 sectors.
Yeah. 7 zones.
That's a lot more talking that you and paying attention that you have to do.
Absolutely.
And if your partner could take some of that load off, that's really important because I'm just picturing what I did with Class B.
Right.
I checked in and I checked out.
Right.
There was unless I had to go to this one area right under short final, I didn't have to talk to them again. Where you are bouncing around in sectors and have to tell them, hey, moving to 6.
Yes.
They're going to 5.
Yes. While also listening to me tell them to come left, come right.
Exactly.
And I get the one finger up a lot.
Yes. There's well, there you go.
Hold on.
It comes back.
Not that finger. The 1 second finger. Probably gives me that finger too.
Well, it comes back to that John brought it up. The CRM is so important. I mean, it's really important in just airspace alone. Take everything else out of it. The airspace alone adds a lot to your plate that the typical pilot and even the typical law enforcement pilot aren't dealing with.
Right.
Right.
You know, I mean, everybody says, "Oh,
Typical, right.
LAX. Oh my God, how did you deal?" It was easy. it was a no-brainer. This is different.
Right.
This is different. I didn't have to worry about, you know, the restrictive stuff.
Right.
You know, I just had to worry about tower. Now we had a lot of towers, and it looks intimidating on the chart.
Right.
But in big scheme of things, it was simple compared to this.
Sure.
This New York City's a little intimidating too. But I think DC, of all the charts I've looked at, I've looked at this one. I think you might have even been the one that showed it to me one time. And I went, oh my gosh, how do you do it? And I didn't even know about the 7-sector thing.
Yeah.
So that's
and
a
then
big workload.
Within that, you also have the routes. This was so they're like little highways. It comes down the river, one of them. The Beltway's one.
Sure.
You know, there's I don't know. I think there's 12 different routes.
Do
So you
you
got to
just-
memorize all this stuff. So
Do you just get a helicopter frequency route or frequency?
no, well, there's a helicopter, but it's attached to the regular traffic. You're not hearing the fixed wing. You can hear in the controller every time. Delta's 555. You're clear to launch or whatever. So you'll hear that part of it. You won't hear Delta talk back.
But it's on a dedicated helicopter frequency with the tower?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Yep.
But that person has multiple duties in that tower.
Yes, and when it's busy, it gets busy.
It's hard to get on the air
Summertime,
sometimes here.
bet.
Oh.
So they'll switch. And there'll be two controllers talking. I mean, those guys at DCA are just amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much stuff going on, and they had a close one recently, but they have got so much stuff going on over there. It's they're real.
And you have
They're top
it
notch.
sounds like you have an excellent relationship
Oh, yeah.
with them.
We do.
How do you foster that relationship besides doing what you're saying and getting their trust and all that? Do you do anything beyond that, especially?
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned air medical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completions Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs, including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors. Thanks to our sponsor, Dallas Avionics, who provides innovative products to law enforcement, the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, military, air medical, search and rescue, and special missions operations. Dallas Avionics distributes OEM equipment, including communications equipment, digital audio systems, PA systems, flight tracking, and other mission-critical devices. Visit DallasAvionics.com for more details. Thanks to our sponsor, Airbus. Airbus provides the most efficient helicopter solutions to its customers who serve, protect, and save lives and safely carry passengers in demanding environments. Its civil and military helicopters are flying all over the world, making missions possible. Visit Airbus.com for more information.
As we conclude this episode of the Hangar Z podcast, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to Sgt Danny Thaw and pilot Kevin Chittick for sharing their invaluable insights and experiences from the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Air Support Unit. Their dedication to public safety and the complexities of operating in one of the most critical airspaces in the country remind us of the vital role aviation plays in law enforcement. Through this conversation, we've highlighted the importance of effective communication and crew resource management and ensuing successful operations. The stories of bravery and innovation you've heard today exemplify the courage and commitment of our public safety professionals who work tirelessly to keep our communities safe. Thank you for joining us on this leg of the Vertical Valor Blades of Valor tour, where we continue to showcase the heroes of public safety aviation across North America. We hope you gained a deeper understanding of the challenges and triumphs faced by these dedicated teams. To dive even deeper into the topics we discussed, be sure to check out the articles and videos by Brent Bundy in Vertical Valor magazine that further examines DC Metro and the Hangar Z Vertical Valor Blades of Valor tour. You can find them over at verticalmag.com. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.